This essay was written by Mario V. Melendez on November 25, 2021, entitled "The Democrat Party Ease Anti-Science on Climate Change." Here goes. Today is Thanksgiving Day. I couldn't have timed this post about science better than today, November 20th. 5. The 106th anniversary of a colossal scientific event. On this day in 1915, Albert Einstein revealed to the world his groundbreaking theory of general relativity, widely acclaimed as the equation that ruled the universe. So it might be a good day to thank him for helping us understand the universe better, even if it's very taxing to wrap our average brain around his theory. Dennis Overby, the New York Times science editor and a physicist himself, dumbed it down best for the rest of us. He wrote, quote, "It describes space-time as a kind of sagging mattress, where matter and energy, like a heavy sleeper, distort the geometry of the cosmos to produce the effect we call gravity, obliging light beams as well, as marbles and falling apples to follow curved paths through space." Unquote. Notice how Overby subtly invoked Isaac Newton, falling apples, in that oversimplification of Einstein's abstract game-changing theory. But in this post on climate change, I'll be invoking Einstein himself, and repeatedly. After all, he was the lone skeptic to the then consensus in the scientific community with respect to Newtonian science on gravity, just as Copernicus, until Galileo agreed with him, was the only skeptic on the geocentrism consensus during his time. And speaking of skeptics, there's a 5-minute video of one scientist's skepticism on climate change. He's Dr. Richard Lindzen, Professor Emeritus of Atmospheric Sciences at MIT. Find a link below at the description. Unlike Al Gore, Joe Biden, AOC, and that very disturbed teenage girl from Sweden, I can't muster the arrogance to talk about a subject best left alone to scientists, and not just ordinary scientists, but those whose expertise is climate science in particular, like Dr. Lindzen. But I know enough about how science works to put in my 2 cents on the matter. So here goes. There are those who'll say Lindzen is just one scientist against 97% of his peers who have declared that climate change is already settled science. Nothing could be more ill-informed. First, science has absolutely nothing to do with consensus. To quote Einstein when confronted with the fact that 100 of his peers contradict his general theory of relativity, he famously answered, quote, "Why 100? If I were wrong, one would have been enough." Unquote. We now know who was right and who was wrong. And all it took was one skeptic, Einstein, to the then consensus among his peers with respect to Newton. His theory that was so universally accepted that it's already called a law, that is the law of gravity. Besides, Dr. Lindzen is by no means the lone skeptic on climate change. Other reputable climate scientists are just as skeptical, like Freeman Dyson, Ivar Giaeva, Will Happer, Patrick Michaels, Ian Plimer, Judith Curry, and others. You might want to Google or YouTube them to belie to yourself the oft-repeated claim that climate change is settled science. Second, except perhaps in extremely rare cases that have become self-evident or have withstood the test of time, there's no such thing as settled science. Otherwise, Einstein would have simply accepted Newton's law of gravity, left undisputed for more than 200 years, and kept his peace. Let that sink in for a moment, and how much less science would have known about the universe today. Just as Newton had his skeptic in Einstein, Einstein has his own skeptics, too challenging him to this day. But thank God that's precisely the ways of science to arrive at a conclusion which is a rigorous and scholarly undertaking called the scientific method, and then followed by never-ending process of doubting and re-examining that conclusion, even the very few already considered as scientific law, like Newton's law of gravity, or so-called settled science. So to say that something is settled science is itself anti-science. By the way, unbeknownst to many, doing away with the scientific method is actually at the root of Galileo's infamous excommunication by Pope Urban II in the 17th century. But I digress. Third, climate change is neither self-evident to be anthropogenic, that is caused by man and can therefore be mitigated by man, nor has it stood the test of time, having started only in the 1970s. And unlike Einstein's theoretical predictions, like gravitational vortex and gravitational waves, the universal speed of light, the existence of black holes, etc., which have all since been proven to be extremely accurate, the doom and gloom predictions relative to climate change have all since been proven to be grossly inaccurate. Not one of them aged well. Fourth, speaking of anthropogenic, I did the math myself. Homo sapiens have been around just 40,000 years out of 4.6 billion years of the Earth's existence. Scaling that down, if the Earth were born 24 hours ago, man has been around only in the last 0.75 seconds. That infinitesimally small period shrinks even more to 0.0017 seconds, given that man started using fossil fuel, supposedly the culprit for climate change, only in the last 200 years out of the 40,000 years he's been around. The 4.6 billion-year-old Earth's temperature has cyclically ebbed and surged and ebbed again over interglacial periods in those billions of years. So the question is, planning how to spend your limited budget for the next 24 hours, would you base it on what happened in 0.0017 seconds of the last 24 hours? Or, put another way, planning how to spend your limited budget for the next year, would you base it on what happened in half of a second of the last year? How does that even make sense? To hysterically cry climate change and affect government policies on data over an infinitesimally small period of time and based on questionable computer models at that, which sometimes give wrong weather predictions, is not science, but ideological zealotry. Unlike zealots and fraudulent politicians, I can't talk about climate change from a scientific point of view, but I have a ton of common sense about it. I'll save that for when I get to the part of this series about the Democrat Party being anti-common sense as well, so stay tuned. Suffice it to say for now that for America to bankrupt itself, pouring trillions of dollars it doesn't have on what could very well be just a hoax would be national suicide. I coined a new word for it, patricide, spelled as P-A-T-R-I-A-C-I-D-E, the act of a nation or a body politic committing suicide. And that couldn't come soon enough for its rival for world supremacy, China. Do you really want to live in a world dominated solely by that evil empire? If that doesn't bother you, since you're an American who hates your own country anyway, like many in the Democrat Party, how about the fact that the reason you're paying an arm and a leg at the pump is because the president you elected believes in a hoax, hook, line and sinker? That's the end of the essay of Mario V. Melendez on climate change, written on September 18, 2018. It's just one installment in a series of long-form posts on his Facebook page, entitled Why We Filipino Americans Refuse to be Democrat, or WW Fart Be Dems. For short, a growing compilation of distinct reasons, 35 so far, why they should stay as far away as possible from the Democrat Party. To access it, please scan the QR code on screen.